What you saw, that is like the heartbeat right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like those events, you know, this is speaking from Papa status, you know, looking down at it now, because that has been the last 5, 6, 8 years, you know, like those events are the heartbeat. They're just like, that's ground central. That's the center that holds much of this scene together, is those experiences of people bringing their art, putting it on the table, loving each other's art, sharing each other's art, passing it. You know, just the effect of passing it and being of one breath, you know, like.
It's beautiful.
While the world is burning, got to make amends. Walk on the sunny side with a positive lens. Talks about passion between the women and the men. Chris Dyer and his creative friends, darling, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Hi, welcome back to Chris Dyer's Creative Friends, the super awesome podcast YouTube interview show where me, your artist friend Chris Dyer, talks to his super awesome creative friends. Today, I got the special guest, Mr. Banjo, who's a legendary glass blower. Some have called him the god of glass, but pretty much he's a really awesome, rad, conscious, heart-centered person who does beautiful work. He's very talented, and we're going to talk about a lot of beautiful and interesting things today. How you doing, Banjo?
I'm good, brother.
Woo!
Thanks for coming up.
Yes,
Yeah.
Thank you for having me in your beautiful home on top of a hill. Where are we?
We're just a few miles southwest of Eugene, Oregon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you probably don't want to say the name of the town, but it's like just trees.
Eugene, yeah.
It's Eugene itself?
Eugene, Oregon, and yeah, we're 20 minutes outside of Eugene up in the hills.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great that this thing that feels like, countryside, cottage country almost, it's still the city of Eugene.
It's the best of both worlds. Yeah.
Nice. And you've been here you moved out here recently, more or less?
4 or 5 years. My wife grew up mostly in Eugene.
Okay.
And I migrated out here from Michigan in '97 and wound up in and around Eugene and Corvallis, the coastal mountains, Willamette Valley. That's where I began blowing glass, was around this area.
So you're from Michigan originally?
Yeah.
But weren't you in Northern California?
Yeah, we actually just got back here from Humboldt County, and we had been there, almost a decade this time, but we had sort of been back and forth between Southern Oregon and Humboldt County.
Okay.
Trinidad,
You're in McKinley,
Arcata.
right?
Yeah, Trinidad.
Trinidad.
Yeah, very close to McKinley.
All right, so this is a question I always ask at the beginning of my shows, because all the people that I interview are, my friends, or I know each other a little bit. Do you remember how we met?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, it was online, of course. And I'm trying to think, but I believe I reached out to you first to do to put art on the walls of a show I was doing at the Escalante Gallery.
Yeah.
If that's the first time I remember interacting.
I think that's the first time I remember talking to you.
I've been a fan, for many years.
I was stoked that you asked me to be in that big LA gallery.
That was a special.
And with all these G's too, because it was, what was the lineup? Do you remember of the painters on the wall?
Of the painters, it was you, Alex Gray, and Allyson, and Amanda Sage, and Luke Brown, yeah. And Mars One had a piece up.
Okay, nice. So it's all these
Brian
legends.
brought down, yeah.
Yeah, I was so
we even
stoked.
had a Rick Griffin piece on the wall that Brian had brought down.
Sick.
So yeah, and then I did a lot of collaborations with friends for that show too. So there was a lot of glass artists involved in the pieces that were made.
I remember
this was one of them. That was in there.
This one here?
Yeah.
This was the one that was on the juxtapose
That's right.
advertisement.
Yeah, that was the one that was actually the one big solo I made for the show.
Yeah. Was that the first time you combined like visual artists with a glass show?
That was the first time I'd ever done a glass show at all.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So
how did it come about?
Well, I was, let's see, initially a friend of mine, Alex Reyna, who was our glass photographer and good friend, he was going to these art potlucks presentations at an artist, John Swihart's house down in Southern California. and Greg Escalante was a regular attendee and friend of John's. And so my friend Alex somehow just got me a gig doing a PowerPoint presentation, a slideshow of my work at his friend John's artist presentation in the backyard, which is this long-running thing they've been doing for a couple decades. And
with all these
many
Gs.
just artists that I very much look up to.
Amazing.
Had been on there, and so I couldn't turn it down. And I had just recently done a show in Florida, in Basel, with a bunch of glass artists that was just sort of like, gave me a glimpse of that aspect of the art world.
It was a group show.
Right, and we went around at Basel and kind of were feeling out how that whole thing was, and I could tell like there's no way nothing I have right now that's gonna fit into that, paradigm. So I came home kind of just like, oh well, whatever. I'm just going to take whatever comes to me based on what I like to make. I'm not going to try and fit into a box. And so around that time, I got this call from Alex to do that thing. And that's why I was like, oh, sure, I have to take this up. But anyway, he then cold hit up Greg at one of the gatherings, showed him pieces of my work, and was like, hey, this is my friend. He makes this glass art. And Greg saw the work and liked it and said, what? I've never seen anything like that. And so he got me and Greg on the phone. And Greg and I spoke for hours that day and just got along great. And he invited me to do a show there, and so
Greg Escalante sounded like a great person.
He's amazing.
And he died just like a year after your show?
Maybe 2 years, yeah.
I so wish I could have made it to that exhibition.
It was a special, yeah.
I think I had something else happening that I couldn't say no.
I remember you were double booked. I do remember you had something you had already agreed to do.
But it looked really magical. I'm happy I sent my boat, which is one of my best paintings.
Yeah, it was amazing. Everybody there, to be able to see your work in person, because most of us hadn't seen any of their work in person, but you're especially loved among the glass community, because glass community is enormously overlaps with the skateboarding community. And so, everybody kind of grew up with that kind of art, like having a Rod Roscott board or something.
And then a
in
Bong.
our generation. Yeah, very much so. In that culture, that blend of two different kind of outlier, street kind of, not the mainstream.
Rebel culture.
Oh yeah, there's huge overlap. So you're on more glass shop walls probably than any other artist,
I didn't know that, but
you've done a few, you've been,
Cool. Well, I'm happy to hear that. And then we only really met in person at your birthday a couple months ago when I was visiting Eugene, and you had a little gathering with your friends, and you guys were playing all these bluegrass instruments. Sam Griswold was the bass player.
Yeah, Sam Grisman. Yeah.
He was such a nice guy. When I met him on your birthday, I was like, oh, what a cool guy. He was all stoked to meet me too.
Oh yeah.
And then later on, I was told that his dad played with the Grateful Dead.
Oh yeah, his dad is the greatest mandolin player of all time. And he's still crushing it now.
Oh yeah, he's still alive.
Yeah, he
What's
did
his
all
name?
of the, David Grisman.
Okay.
Yeah, and he was he played all the mandolin on American Beauty, Ripple and Friend of the Devil, and all of the little mandolin licks and Old in the Way, and
That's it.
Shady Grove. All of the times you've ever heard Jerry with a mandolin player, it was Sam's dad.
Yeah.
So
Are you a Deadhead yourself?
I would say I'm a Deadhead. Yeah. I was even more of a Grisman head, which is funny. Cause
no way.
Yeah, because Jerry died right around the time I was finding out about that whole world. And so when I dropped out of college in 96 first, but then 97 for good, what was going on, I dropped out and came out west, and what was going on was David Grisman shows. That was a scene that was kind of a little pocket, and so acoustic music heads who were kind of dead oriented but weren't going to go to Fish or String Cheese or any of these younger kind of things. Yeah, David Grisman Quintet.
And that's
was,
bluegrass?
It's, well, dog music. David Grisman, Sam's dad, they call him David Dog Grisman.
Okay.
D-A-W-G. And he basically made dog music, like in the same way that you would think of like Alex as like a pioneer of visionary art, or Venosa, you know, or like
They got a style
Elvis
that's
did rock and
almost like a
roll.
whole scene in itself.
Yeah, he was an island. He was an island of, and he still is. And so he blended like everything under the sun, like, you know, gypsy jazz, traditional Jewish, you know,
I gotta find some of his
music,
records
bluegrass. Oh man, you'd love it. It's all over the map. It spans from the tightest, highest level bluegrass you've ever heard, all the way to like super traditional, you know, songs from Eastern Europe, from, you know, grandfathers, and you know, modern jazz, just like.
So if I go to a record store, which section would I find it in? If you saw all over the place?
Oftentimes you'll find it in bluegrass, because he is still considered to be, you know, probably the greatest. You know, he's in his early 70s maybe, but yeah, probably bluegrass.
Nice.
Yeah.
And are you a bluegrass player yourself?
Yeah, yeah.
Your name Banjo comes from the
Yeah.
fact that you play the banjo?
Well, it came from making banjos.
From making
Yeah,
banjos?
yeah, because when I was in college, I was like in sculpture, and I first started making guitars, and then I had an instructor who had made banjos, and he was always talking about it. And he was this burly old biker kind of guy. He used to make Harley Davidsons and, you know, fabricate fenders and restore. He was just like the most capable, insanely gifted artist I've ever met, you know, like right up my alley, very tactile, and, you know, built stuff and forged stuff. But anyway, he was always talking about making banjos. Back when I used to make banjos. John Witterstein was his name, rest in peace. But so I was like, I'm gonna try making a banjo. So after making a couple guitars, I made a banjo, and then I just like fell in love with the thing. And right around then I was getting into the Dead. You know, this is 94, 95, and found out Jerry played banjo, and I started listening. You know, he had this old stack of records in the shop. It included a bunch of old bluegrass and dog music, Grisman, all of it. And so all at once, like, I, you know, came into bluegrass, that kind of music, made a banjo in the sculpture shop, then dropped out of college right then with the banjo, and went on the road and basically learned to play it. So like, it was that time that, you know, banjo became a nickname because I always had a banjo. And so people, you know how it is on the road, you're traveling, people have their road names and stuff. It was like, hey, banjo, you know, banjo guy. Hey, you with the banjo. And so eventually
It's almost like your deadhead name.
yeah, and very similarly. For me, it was Rainbow Gatherings, but it was very similar, you know.
Nice.
The road name.
So I want to ask you about your roots, and you're just saying you went to college for sculpting?
Yeah, I started, well, I came from a college-educated house on my mom's side. She taught school, and her husband, my stepdad, was a principal and accountant for schools and stuff. So, and then on my dad's side, they were total salt of the earth farmers, still are. You know, all live in one county, like, you know, dairy farms, and just very just mellow, good, chill, you know, Michigander people, and not a lot of college on that side. And so I kind of just went to college sort of thinking like, you go to college, you know, 'cause it was like normalized, and what else do you do? So I wound up there initially trying to do like veterinary medicine, thinking I would work with farm animals or something, because I always thought that was cool, you know, the vets doing work and stuff. And I flunked out of that like immediately, and then met the art school kids, and my mom's actually an artist as well as a teacher, so I always did a lot of art, but met the art school kids and started selling them drugs. I kind of came from a little ghetto town, and so like, just seeing how much fun they were having, like behind the dorms, like just having bonfires and cutting and welding and painting on stuff, and, you know, so after flunking out of like, you know, just freshman level, whatever the stuff you take to initiate, you know, pre-medical, whatever, veterinary career, you know, by the midway through, I was like art major, you know, and so right then I started, you know.
But you said you quit college?
Yeah, I went to school in '94, because I graduated in '94, and so I went to college in fall '94, and then I dropped out by '97, and I had accumulated almost a whole BFA.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would have had a double major in sculpture and photography.
Oh, nice.
But I started out after that first semester of flunked pre-veterinary medicine. But from there, I started out with art history. So I was art history major for about 2 years, art history and sculpture together. And I got all the way up from the earliest art, cave paintings and red ochre, on the cave wall, all the way up to around the 1800s. And then I dropped out. So I actually never got schooled at all on any modern art whatsoever. I dropped out of school having known only up to that point, and then went traveling and learning. And then psychedelic art and world art were two things that were huge in my life already. So that kind of filled in some blanks. But I didn't really find out about the modern art world until it came knocking at our door as glass, community in the last decade or so. And so it's been a really funny thing to look back, which, like Alex's Mission of Art, that was pretty much one of the textbooks for just contextualizing art and the role of art and the history of it and what it's become and how it's used in today's culture as, a way to bond in the same way that humans have always created art as a way to bond and express, the infinite.
Beautiful. So you quit college and after almost graduating,
Yeah.
and you also mentioned that you went to rainbow gatherings. Did the rainbow gatherings and whatever you learned there get in the way of your formal education?
Definitely, yeah, thankfully. Yes, like I think it was 95, I had friends that were going to gatherings. And that's where I'd heard about it. It's like, what? There's a bunch of people camping in the woods?
No money.
Right. Yeah.
Just being free.
Yep. So, and that was, like I said, that was right around when Jerry died. And
Where
so
were these rainbow gatherings?
they're in national forests all around the world. Well, here we call them national forests, but they occur all over the world, these gatherings. But in the U.S., they happen in national forests somewhere.
Okay.
Basically, word of mouth, people show up.
You went to a few in different places.
Yeah, all over the country.
I went to a few in Quebec.
Yeah.
There was an international one in Quebec too at one point.
I think I remember hearing about that.
That was like 2004.
Yeah. It was basically they call themselves an organization, and it came about from Vietnam vets and just sort of board dissenters in the early 70s getting together to pray for peace on the 4th of July. And so the early infrastructure, like rather than celebrating fireworks and stuff, it was a place when all of these kind of early back to the land hippies were coming back all damaged from Nam and stuff. They would have these gatherings and invite everybody, all the different tribes, from all people from all lands, and they're heavily influenced by like native North American prophecy and cultural traditions and stuff, because most of these people had already eschewed, of course, their white Anglo-American heritage.
And what did you learn there?
They essentially have a whole code of conduct, which seems pretty much in line with, I would say it's a combination of what we would today look at as like religious, ideological concepts. It's like a combination of like religious ideas about, God and creation, creator, or whatever, kind of mixed with like the old world, indigenous kind of the earth children, like tribal society, holistic perspective on truth and our place in the world. So rainbow gatherings are a place where, 99% of us humans are essentially colonists or colonized. We're both. We're all of it. Like, there's no culture left aside from these tiny little dots in the Amazon and a little spot over here in Africa and, over here in
There's
Australia.
no original
there's a
culture
tribe, too.
left almost.
Almost none. It's less than 1%. And so, we are all, like the rest of us, are one culture, the global culture. And it's, it began with the first writing and began with the first city building and the first, mathematics and all of these different things that, the symbology and the codification of the world and to rational, linear.
So it changed your perspective of
Yeah,
what we're
it
at.
completely changed my perspective because it was like a healing, people were there. They started that up as a response to really kind of damage, I think, that had been occurred, you know, on personal level. For me, like I went there just with the usual amount of, you know, trauma and hits that any normal, you know, Western kid just grows up getting, you know, from culture and all of the messages we hear from school and, you know, pop culture and media and
that
all that.
made you like quit college?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It was. There was nothing at that point. You know, like I said, my dad was a dairy farmer, you know, and his whole entire family were doing that right down the farm, and very just salt of the earth, very Luddite, you know. And then my mom, that side, they were, you know, this is Southern Michigan, very industrialized, very multicultural, and really awesome, urban, and also very kind of disconnected from the land and from earth. And so there was a sense of disconnection among my conservative, you know, side of the family, the dad side, where I would spend weekends and summers and holidays and stuff. There was a disconnection between them and the rest of the world, the rest of culture, the rest of all the beautiful things that occur everywhere. You know, like they were small, like cultural pocket of, you know, the conservative Americans or whatever. And then my mom's side, where I grew up and was mainly informed by, like, grew up with breakdancing and, you know, skateboarding and everything else, like running around, dodging crackheads, you know, just the most, you know, all of the things that city throws at you, you know, and then all the shit in between too, from just like being on the edge of it or having friends that were out, you know, all the levels of Babylon in a sense. So it's like there was something disconnected there too, like it was too disconnected from Earth, and so neither one of those stories could hold me. And when I found the gatherings, everybody there was pretty much like, yeah, we don't go for any of that shit.
Right.
For the most part. I mean, everybody brings, it's like a lot. It's like any festival or anything, only there wasn't like a band playing that everybody's like paying money to go see. You know,
It's like a real rootsy Burning Man with less hype.
Yeah, it's a free Burning Man where the principles of it are no. I mean, nowadays it's a little different. So I can't, you know, I speak of these halcyon days of rainbows, which it changed throughout the 2000s and the teen years because of visionary culture and because of Burning Man culture and all that. That kind of siphoned off all of the good, bushy, bright-eyed, upper middle class college kids, you know.
They went to the cool one instead.
Yeah, they went to the one that was easy and didn't challenge them, you know. You can pay some money and go to the little festival and like do a bunch of psychedelics on Friday night, and then Saturday night do a bunch of Molly, and then on, you know, Sunday you've blown all your serotonin, and Monday you're back at, you know, crabby at your job at work. You know, I'm not saying that's everybody's experience, but like when you stand back from festival culture, you know, it really is a catch for people just looking for a good time.
They're looking for a good time, or maybe to find themselves
for connection.
And
also, right, but the construct itself of a festival or concert, which costs money to be at, versus the construct of like the gatherings was, you know, it's huge. The gathering is all-inclusive. Like everybody can come. If you're poor, if you're a runaway, if you're a criminal, you may be running from the law for who knows what, and you are safe there. Like if you
were accepted.
you're accepted. If you act in a way that's not in accordance with, you know, truth and the natural law and just do no harm principles of, you know, that every human really knows in their heart, then you would get squeezed out or whatever. You know, you wouldn't find you'd get formed. You know, I don't know how it. But basically, the rainbow gatherings are like the other option. Like you can go all the way to the left in a sense, like you know, progressively and politically and ideologically, and wind up, you know, where that leads in society, or you can try and go all the way over to the right and completely resist the left and all the things you think that, you know, this goes for either side. It doesn't really matter.
It's just open for
right.
finding
and the
yourself.
rainbow is like, knows that situation exists, and, you know, the rainbow family, at least at that point, or the gathering, the people that go there, it's in the tenets, like it's in the understanding of the group already, that, you know, that we're all sovereign beings, and that none of those types of ideologies or binary type, you know, descriptions would ever truly encompass, you know, one person.
So where did glassblowing come into all this? Quitting college, going to rainbow gatherings, where did glass come in?
The first place I saw it was at rainbow gatherings.
Cool.
and traveling around.
People had their torches right there in the woods?
They would drag some tanks in, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right in the, there's like a parking lot type of area there, sort of like a dead lot or any kind of festival lot. And yeah, people would drag them out there and just be making little pipes. This is probably 97. And then when I wound up settling around Eugene, Corvallis, and there was a lot of glass blowers there. And so as soon as I got there, it was like everybody's doing it in their garages and stuff. So and I started being in different friend groups where people were doing it and finding about it.
And how long did it take you to get like good, or you know, like what was that like? What was a pivotal moment of your like how many years have you been doing this?
22.
22.
Yeah.
And what was that curve where you're like, okay, now I'm finding my groove, both technically, but also I'm finding my audience?
Oh man. Well, the audience is always there. Like for pipe makers, you know, I was fortunate because of the pipe makers that were blowing glass at a really high level when I began were already the best in the game. And so I was lucky enough to just be around the people who were doing the best work, and I was influenced by it directly because I got to see the pieces and talk to them and get little tidbits.
That was here in Oregon or in Cali?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. Eugene and Corvallis, Oregon was.
Who were your mentors?
Well, I learned from a kid, Levi Beard, and he was young, like high school dropout. And it's funny because I was a college dropout, and I had traveled the country a bit, and then landed up around Corvallis. But so he had been already blowing glass in his parents' garage, and there was a little horse stable that he converted to a little glass station. It was like 8 feet wide, and he was back on his oxygen bill on his dad's account. And so I showed up, and I was like swinging beaster weed and just typical little patchwork, you know, dreadlock, you know. Little hippie kid, and like I just came and started serving his family weed, paid off his oxygen bill, and for all of that, and kept the oxygen bill paid, and for that he allowed me to be in the shop and learn, and gave me like everything I needed to know. Like he showed me all of the basics to make pipes, pretty complex ones for the time, because he had learned from Jason Lee and Marcel, who were at the time, they were definitely like Z-boys of the movement.
Oh wow.
That's how you would look at it. And so I would say, you know, those guys were like the guys in Z-Boys, and I came around, I was more like Tony Hawk's generation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Bong's Brigade.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Or Hocus Pocus stuff, you know, like where like Marcel, Jason Lee, Clinton, Pedro, Ezra.
Marcel would be Jason Lee.
What's that?
Marcel would be Jason Lee.
Oh, there is a Jason Lee glassblower.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a funny thing.
I thought you brought it back to skateboarding analogies.
That's what's funny too, because Jason Lee, he was one of the dudes that had like he was the only one. Like the rest of them all had names like Marcel, Clinton, you know, Ezra, Pedro, you know, Chris Dawson, and then Jason Lee. And so we're like, Jason Lee's already got like a cool name. So they all had star status, but they were like that group of, you know, early Z-Boys. And then by the 2000-ish, because I began in 99, but 2009, 2001, it was quite a wave. Like we jumped on a wave they created just before the internet was taken off. And so
you were making pipes and bongs, and when was the dab rig invented?
The dab rig thing is about 10, 15 years now, I guess.
Because it's a new kind of smoking weed.
Yeah, it's a revisit. Yeah, definitely taking dabs and heating them up a quartz banger, you know, and with a torch and bubbling it. That's like, I think that is about 8-10 years old now, you know. But that's pretty. But
that opened up a whole new market for glass blowers.
Yeah. Oh, a huge.
With a different price tag on it too.
Well, yeah, it went up in kind of in tandem, you know, with legalization.
Are bongs as expensive as dab rigs, or dab rigs is a whole different universe?
It's pretty much it's the same on a lot of levels, but like up into a certain price point. But then there's a certain price point where there's very few bongs. There's very few marijuana or flower pipes above a certain point, you know. So all of the
what's the roof for a price for a bong per se?
Well, for like a flower pipe.
For
just flower. You know, right now commonly you won't see a flower pipe much more than $5,000 10 grand, you know, and that's pretty. It's not like every day even. That's if someone who
It's like the
well-known-
bongest of the
it's-
bongest.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of sweet work, but like there's hash pipes, there's dab rigs going for 5 or 10 grand like every day, all day.
Right. That's
So
like
the
like
amount
almost
of right, and
bottom.
Yeah. It's I wouldn't say bottom, but it's the mid for sure. You know, 4 figures is a solid middle.
And what's the roof for a dab rig?
I guess a couple have sold for over 100. Yeah,
That's
a couple have sold for over 100, and too many to count probably.
$100,000 for a dab rig. That's pretty. I don't call it crazy because it sounds like crazy is a bad thing, but it's like,
It's crazy.
wow, how we would have thought of like a pipe.
It worked its way up. I mean, over 25 years, you know, or so. Like the move, you know, this glass pipe art movement is, it began really in the early 90s, 80s and early 90s on dead lots with Bob Snodgrass. And so by the mid 90s, and Bob had a few apprentices. He had Hugh, and he was his first one, I think. But like just lots of different. Bob had lots of different apprentices. But like by the mid '90s, late '90s, Marcel, Clinton, Jason, Pedro, Ezra. So Bob was almost like the, he was like the banana board era. But it was skateboarding for sure. They were doing handstands on skateboards. You know what I mean? For sure.
I like the skate
definitely-
analogy.
and definitely doing it barefoot. Like they were skateboarding around barefoot, you know? And so when Marcel and Clinton and Jason and Pedro and Ezra, Chris Dawson came around, they're like the Fab Five. Like
And Marcel is the Marcel from the
that's your
Starship
Marcel.
Collective.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. He was one of the original like Z-Boys.
Cool.
And they
Our
were like
former guest from the last episode. Check him out.
yeah, Marcel's great. He's one of my early heroes, and he's a granddaddy in a sense to my craft because he taught the dude that taught me. You know?
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, so those guys, that was like the late 90s, you know? And then, like I said, by the time my generation came in the 2000s, early 2000s, I started in 99, but we were getting going and getting our legs in the early 2000s. We were like that Bones Brigade, Hocus Pocus era, 80s into the 90s.
Right.
And then now I'm 22 years in, and so we watched it go. Like when I got in, Clinton was making, let me think, his bubblers were probably $250, $300 wholesale for a really sweet bubbler, and it would sell you could probably sell it for $500 at a store, or to like the headiest dude on the string cheese lot or the fish lot or whatever. And when we began, at that time, like we were making $5 and $10 and $50 pipes, and to aspire to be able to make a $250 like Clinton or Marcel, amazing. And then right not long after I started, they pushed it up, to where Marcel was making like $1,000. That we heard a rumor. I had a friend that was one of Marcel's ex-girlfriends, and she came and was like, Marcel makes like $1,000 piece a week now. He doesn't even mess with any little things like this, because we're in there making our spoons and stuff. So then we're just like, what? So that became the new goal,
Wow.
Not that it was immediately.
It was a
able to be
step in
done.
the ladder.
Every step of the way. This is back in 2000. So in 2000, Marcel and Clinton and those guys, 2001. By then they were probably getting. They were the high level, and they were probably getting $4, $5, $6 grand out of like a really sweet big flower pipe, Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wow.
So it crept up slowly. There were never any really big jumps. When dab rigs came, it built strength and kept growing faster, but it never went from like 5 to 20.
It was one step at a time in 20 years.
time.
What do you think is that brought it up to those prices? Just the quality of artistry. You're smoking out of a beautiful art sculpture, pretty much, that's functional.
It's a combination of a lot of factors. The legalization of marijuana going across the country, dabs, hash, like people making slabs. All of a sudden, you had dispensaries everywhere popped up that could legally bring in herb money. So they, all the money that started generating around there would get spent on glass, lots of it, for luxury, like cars, trips, glass, of course. So that jacked the price up, and then also the smuggle ability of slabs. You all of a sudden could just smuggle like tens of thousands of dollars worth of hash flying around, doesn't stink, like stack it up. A lot different than big old bulky pounds from my day. So like, or the early days, that also affected it,
So that just brought more money to
all
the
kinds
growers.
of it, more money, more attention, all of it. Yeah, the hash is like.
So the people who buy these pipes are like the actually owners of farms or weed brands who just want to smoke in the most elegant way. So it's almost like having the nicest Rolex or chain, but they're like smoking out of the most flowery, crazy banjo pipe. Whenever I see somebody smoking out of a banjo pipe, I'm like, damn, you're a baller.
It's funny how diverse the base is, It does go all the way from the farmer to the processor to the person that merchandises it. There's people taking chances who are totally in the black market area that are, doing stuff, and they're part of the market. And there's people who are going entirely through the legitimate legal routes, and all kinds of legal money's coming in. It's fueled by people who are just passionate, whatever it is, like this is like better than a car, You can use it. It's fairly interesting.
It's resellable.
Yeah, it's resellable. Like
it won't.
Almost anything will retain its value.
Right.
If beyond a certain point, like there's at least 200 people in the scene, I'd say, whose work will just never decrease in value, as long as.
But it
whatever
can gain with the years as they gain in status, like a painting could.
It's
as opposed to a car that loses it with mileage.
Yeah, same way. It's just what's interesting. You know a similar kind of thing to what we know, with there being a young group of people that like gobble up the art that speaks to them, like even like skateboards, even like broken skateboards. That's a very tactile thing, and if someone's into skating, to grab onto that, it's like it puts them in the place where skating takes them. And so like it's the same way. It's a spiritual thing. It's a spiritual art. It's a spiritual exchange, because when you share the pipe and share that experience,
Yeah, it's a usable thing. But what I think what's cool about these fancy dab rigs is, say, as compared to a painting that you put in your living room, and when your guests come over and they see it, it's like, oh, wow, you got an original Chris Dyer, that's so cool. But you can't take it to the streets and be like, hey, look at my painting. While the dab rig, you go around your little case.
That's a major part of it.
You show up to the show. Like I had a show in LA last month with Pinky Bruce.
Oh, I love
and
Pinky.
all the guests came with the little cases. They sat on a table. They all brought their like prime collection piece.
You just saw it. What you saw, that is like the heartbeat right there. Like those events, this is speaking from Papa status, looking down at it now, because that has been the last 5, 6, 8 years, like those events are the heartbeat. They're just like, that's ground central. That's the center that holds much of this scene together, is those experiences of people bringing their art, putting it on the table, loving each other's art, sharing each other's art, passing it, just the effect of passing it and being of one breath,
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it brings you to a place that.
Do you think, I'm going to make a difficult question here. Do you think it's, as you said, a beautiful thing of exchanging art and expression and stoke for each other's pieces? Or is there also like a little bit of a superficial show-offy, like, ooh, look at what I got? And you as a rootsy person who's like this humble, son of a farmer that built his way up, how do you feel about your art being used as a status for somebody to show off their wealth? Or is that not the way you see it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me think about that, how to respond to that.
I know it's a little bit of a judgmental kind of question, but I'm sure,
not at all.
I'm sure, I don't know, there's a little bit of everything.
Yeah, not at all. The first thing that I thought of was it's definitely both. And that's a beautiful thing. And I, as a grown man and a father, living on the land. I mean, I live in a nice house that someone built, but like, I live in the forest and see the sun come up, and go down. I identify with that kind of simple father side, dad's people out down on the farm. I've been drawn back to the earth, and that's my model for my lineage and ancestry of how you do it. You know, you start by getting closer to the earth. But on the mom side, you know, that was very much like my grandpa went to Yale, and my mom was, you know, taught special education for years, you know, emotional impaired. She's a world traveler. She practices the Bahai faith. So I
which
grew up.
which is a religion of all religions. Almost.
Yeah, they recognize the divinity of all of the different prophets. And so it's a religion that emerged out of Shiite Islam in the 1800s, in the early 1800s. And Baha'u'llah was the prophet, and he basically taught that that all of the manifestations of God all speak of and honor the same one truth, the same one God.
So your mom influenced you into
My
oneness.
mom, way huge. So I grew up in that environment more, but it was still, you know, it was still very city oriented, you know, like it was very civilizationally oriented. It was still a monotheistic religion, you know. It didn't really have a lot to offer about connecting with the body and the earth and reality, because it was a very emancipatory, you know, up into the spiritual realms is where they focus, like most, you know, really most Abrahamic religions, you know, do focus on the upper end of it, the father stuff, the logical stuff, the male stuff.
Let me rephrase this question. You become so popular, Banjo. You're like, you know, probably the best known glassblower these days. I know it's discussed, but you're huge these days. But you're really just a simple man. You know, you're an artist. How does it feel? Are you stoked that you blew up and that you got all this popularity and fame and recognition? Or is it kind of like annoying at the same time, or a lot of pressure? There's, you know, you gotta be careful what you say and what you do sometimes. I'm asking you as somebody who's also gone through the same, you know? And it's both a blessing and a curse sometimes.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you what. Well, there's a statement that to an ordinary man, everything seems a blessing or a curse, but a warrior sees everything as a challenge. And so I have to say that it's been a challenge, and it's included many blessings, you know, and it's very difficult for me to it's difficult for me to really describe or refer to any of the experiences that have come about through my being this popular in my field, and it's reaching out into some other fields, obviously, but I can't describe any of it as a curse because of my worldview, you know. I see those things as challenges. You know, I believe that everything that happens to us happens for our enlightenment or for our enjoyment.
Beautiful.
Or both. And so even the things that present as challenges or curses, and it's been a fucking curse at times, so, you know, don't get me wrong, but I can't rest with that being the description, you know. So it's yes in both, you know, and it's like, the further I go with it, the more I realize it's like, it's a platform, it's a plate that I can serve a ministry on, and the more the plate gets developed, it's like the more I feel called to develop, you know, myself and what it is that I'm here on earth to share, so that I could serve that on that plate.
Beautiful, man. Woo! Thanks for doing the work. So, as we were talking, glass has been growing both in technicality, in beauty, in price range. How much bigger do you see both yourself as an individual artist and the whole scene growing? Like, how much more is it going to flower?
I think that it will continue to flower and rise in tandem with. I think it will continue on, like, really strongly. I think regardless of what happens with the rest of the world, like, this is something that people want, you know, like handmade, beautiful objects that put you in connection to the natural world via the herb that you smoke it with, you know, through it.
And weed just keeps on getting legalized more and more. So.
Yeah, and the connection between people that happens when they share art and share herb, and like those things will outlast governments, financial systems, name it. As long as there is, there's a cost to everything. As long as there's propane and oxygen and glass, like, we'll be making this stuff. Like, this might be money at some point. It's money now for me. I don't even, this is just, it's currency, and I put all of my love into it. So it's infused with the quality of love that I have for myself, and that can flow into it, and can be a gift to people who enjoy it.
Is it your intention that people? Well, I think it's almost inevitable that people would have a more enjoyable experience of smoking their herb and their medicine out of something that's beautiful. But because you put that magician's spiritual intention into the spiritual piece you're making, this is a meditating lady, do you think that would interfere in a positive way with the medicine being burnt and going through it and then reaching the person? Do you think some code is injected into the herb people be smoking through going through your pipe?
I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
that description. And for a lot, I was initiated into Reiki maybe 20 years ago.
Okay, nice.
A little longer even, right before I started blowing glass. And so with that line of practice, the idea that everything's in motion and everything you touch is informed by your vibration. Like, I got it in my mind. I was just like, whoa. So when you're holding two rods of glass in front of a flame, and they're hard as rock, they're crystalline, and then the heat causes those electrons and molecules to move around so fast they become slippery and completely lose their connection to each other and their rigidity. I can't help but wonder, and I've been thinking about this for over 20 years. I do remember having this when I began, because I can remember the shop I was in when it first occurred to me, and it was a shop it was like 3 months in to glass, so I can remember this thought that far back. But like, what kind of energy, like what happens to this molten glass? What happens to those molecules that are all in flux? I'm part of this circuit. I'm grounded to the earth. My hands are holding it. Now the glass itself is an insulator, but when the glass starts to heat up, it's conductive in this different way. And so it's like, long story short, I don't know. It's 20 years in the making, and it's only been more recently that I've started to, maybe 5 or 6 or 8 years that I've started to really practice certain internal things rather than just sort of think about them and learn about them. And the more I practice, the more I'm like, whoa, even before I knew what the hell was going on, I think I was putting my love in these things, and it was something that people would feel and tell me they felt, even at a time when I wasn't in touch with that level of love for myself yet.
Right.
So it's just really interesting the way that reflection can happen.
Right. Well, this is a very, I love glass blowing, not that I can do it at all, but I love seeing, I don't want to burn my fingers.
Oh yeah, that's real. That's like me with skateboarding now. I get it.
But you're working with this heat and this fire, which is pure energy that you can see and feel, and you're melting matter and curving it and making all this crazy thing. It's really like, I don't know, I think it's a very special way of making art. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Now, other than doing this art, you're also like a charity man, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
What's some movements that you've been contributing lately?
Well, there's two that we've been really involved with for a lot of years. One was the Michigan Glass Project, which that's in Detroit, Art Road, Detroit, and our friend Allyson and Drew Cups. They they didn't have one last year because of the situation. But they've been going quite a few years, where they bring in a lot of glass artists. Everybody collaborates and makes all kinds of art and auctions it off, and then all of the proceeds go to putting art back in these really ravished inner city schools that have lost art from the curriculum as part of budget cuts and just typical flight out of the urban areas. So that's one that like very awesome. Like we would go in and collaborate with several artists and make, you know, a really sweet piece with like 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 artists in it. And you know, I mean, by the time it's done, you know, we're out getting done in the middle of the night, and everybody's there watching it get done. You know, it's exciting.
Super special for the kids.
Yeah, that's sweet. So these are kids that wouldn't have art, so it's like it puts art, you know, art in a school for a whole year. That's one. And then another one, we do work with this group, Imado, which is a group in Kenya that is fighting to, or working to end female genital mutilation, FGM, and help them basically not have to succumb to the early marriage and be kind of bartered as, you know, it's rough over there. The Maasai people are pastoral, you know, herders, and the lands keep getting encroached on. So it's like, you know, the cattle and it's the customs of young marriage and, you know, clitorectomies and cutting the.
Whoa.
It's so fucking brutal. But like my aunt is an awesome lady, my Aunt Beth, and she's gone around the world helping different groups, you know, from the ground up, real grassrootsy. And this is a group that she became aligned with a few years ago. So we've been doing lots of auctions and stuff for them the last few years. You know, Ann has like 100 girls. When I started with them, they had 12. And so when we were bringing a few $100, it was like pretty big, you know. And so now they have like 100 girls. They're building a rescue center. You know,
Wow.
And you know, she's housing them. Like Anne is a woman who's a Maasai woman that had been cut, and then when she grew up and had daughters, she was like, nuh-uh. And so then she, you know, fought and had to go through all the cultural stuff. This is, you know, she's not much older than us, but she had to go through the cultural stuff of breaking with the family traditions, and you know, it's crazy stuff. And it's nuts because the Maasai can't remember. Like, there's no cultural heritage, that they can't remember a time when they didn't do this. And so for them, it's become involved as what they think of as like a traditional part of their culture. But if you go back, like those of, you know, from the outside world studying history,
They're like, why are you guys cutting those women's parts?
Dude, those practices were brought to them by Arab slave traders. Like an Egyptian, you know, those times they would go out and capture slaves from the you know, outlying lands. And those are ways of marking slaves. All circumcision.
But like what? So they don't have any pleasure during sex?
That's part of it. Absolutely. Yeah. That's the stated pleasure.
That's
It's absolute misogyny. It's like the earliest form of misogyny, and it's male and female. I mean, it's tough to talk about male circumcision because that's so interwoven with our culture still. But female circumcision, there's really not many people that would disagree that it's a barbaric, you know, horrifying practice. You know, but it's not even the Maasai's tradition. You know, those people, the ancestral, you know, line of those people would have gone back to times before that was even happening. But since this was like many hundreds of years ago when that practice got woven in, it's, you know, it's just thought of as being what we always do. And so Anne is somebody that had to break with that part of her tradition, but still is Maasai. Like still identifies, you know, full on. And so they have a community of like moms and aunts. It's like a total underground kind of thing. Like she goes and fucking rescues these girls on a motorcycle. Wow. Like Anne just like crashed a motorcycle last year, like going and rescuing like 11-year-old girl who's about to get cut and married off. So that's the group that I'm most passionate with right now because it's still going on. Like Michigan is on a hiatus, but as soon as that jumps up, we'd love to help with that too.
Nice. Well, good job on, you know, helping those two issues. And thank you for informing us. It seems like the world has an infinity of problems.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, how do you see the world these days? And this is a very general question. You can go off on, you know, what does it take to make the world a better place? You know, we're artists. We're just making beautiful things for people who appreciate it, but we're also men with power and maybe some influence or, you know, at least ideas, or we can talk about, I don't know, like, how can we help the world get out of the madness we currently are in, especially in these last couple of years?
Well, the one-word answer, I think we both know, you know, the one-word answer.
Love.
That's it.
Yeah.
You know, and so from there, if you look at it like this, there's four different ways of approaching the problems of the world. One of them, the first one would be with cynicism. Oh, whatever, no big deal. They'll take care of it. I'm not gonna look at that. They'll take care of it. It's fine. And the second way is really nihilistic. Okay, we're all fucked. It's fucked. There's no point in doing anything. We're fucked. It's done. It's shot. Look at them. The elite, whatever, they're doing it. And the third way would be the angel alien kind of thing. Outside savior, political leader, Telegram, Instagram influencer, conspiracy theorist, truther, the right social justice message, whatever it is. Like, it's an outside thing that hopefully will just figure itself out, right? Aliens,
somebody will come to
angels,
rescue us.
yeah, something. And then the fourth way, obviously, is the self. The self has to wake up, When enough selves wake up, maybe, we're mainly awake instead of kind of mainly asleep. And so, back to how do we help the world? We acknowledge what pain it is that we hold, that we bring to it, firstly. And if that's pain that we feel because we're ashamed of things that we've done, then we need to face that. And if it's pain that we feel when we see injustices happening to other people, we need to face the pain here, because we're adding more pain to the world when we commiserate and get on that vibration of pain and misery with the people who are being hurt. And the people who are hurting them have a level of pain that goes even beyond that of those who are getting hurt. Now, that's not an easy, that's not an easy view to hold, and it's easy to say, being in such a abundantly safe, fortunate, reality and world that we live in,
So would you be optimistic about humanity at this difficult time where we're facing so much division? Sometimes I can imagine maybe we can get over racism or the fights between the males and the females or this culture and this religion. But now we're thrown with the whole thing about the vaccine, for example, or COVID, or what does COVID mean, how dangerous it is, what should our reaction be? And now the newest thing to divide yourself is oh, you should get the vaccine or you're a bad person. And then on the other side, me hey, I just don't feel I need it. I feel I'm healthy. Please don't force me to get this thing. And now these two factions are fighting. It's almost we'll always find the next thing to divide ourselves. Do you think we can get out of this?
This entity, we don't want to say they, this ideology that humans are dirty and bad and that there's scarcity and that we're dangerous to each other, essentially that we're dangerous to ourselves. And so we need help from a better, higher other to tell us the truth about how to live and be. That's the oldest trick in the book. That's what I'm saying about this global culture. And if you break down the word culture, what do you get? You get cult and you get And so if you go into the word what do you get? Is the first city, the city-state of That's where Hammurabi and all these early, king, priest, whatever cultures, that had the fully developed civilization that included,
Those laws.
human trafficking, laws, all sorts of shit. Violence, so much shit. Cut off your ear if he does this, and do this if he does that, Laws, written down laws, it's always that. That's in opposition. Any written down law is already going to be in opposition to the truth, The word is not the thing. Truth is what we have in our heart. Truth is love. Truth is what we are, what we're born of, life, this is true. This is what's happening right now.
So you feel we're at a time where we are being asked, maybe we like it or not, do you want to remain being part of this society you've been enjoying the last lifetime or so, or duck out and live in nature and learn how to grow your own food and take care of yourself because you're not longer allowed to participate unless you do this thing that you don't want to do? That's a hard option I'm looking at, and it's...
Oh, I made it. I'll tell you straight up, bro. I made it 25 years ago. And every single thing that's happened since I've been Banjo has been bonus. Right on. Mm-hmm. And now I'm like, oh, shit. Like, I'm at this spot where I have a voice, you know, and a platform. And I've had experiences that I think give me perspectives that might be useful for other people, just in the way that others' experiences and them sharing them have been useful for me in my growth and discovering how to get into my heart and how to heal myself without needing an alien or an angel or an other.
Or a government.
That the government I put as part of, like, there's somewhere between 1 and 3. You know, 1 is like, fuck it, they'll take care of it. That's kind of that's one way of, like, but then 3, the angel ally, you know, the angel alien government other, that's also fits there too, you know. I'm waiting for the aliens to come through and be like, okay, humans, we love you, you're fucking it up here, these are the guys who fucking, like, I'm not depending on it. You are the alien. Like, that awakening exists right here, you know. The waiting for it to happen is what actually is what creates the duality. Mm-hmm. And so it will never come, you know. And that's because I'm with the alien theory. Name one. I love it. You know what I mean? I love it. All of those stories are beautiful, and, like, they're preferable for me to many of the stories that we hear from our mainstream.
Perhaps I know I'm an alien side, or a reincarnation of I might have been an alien in a past life, and now I'm living a human life, and I'm trying my best to shine my light and whatever. But I still look like just like a white dude human. And when I talk, that's how people observe me. So my potency is not as great as if I'm, like, you know, a green dude coming down from a spaceship being like, hey guys, you know, this is how it is.
I'm going to tell you what.
Not that I know the truth anyways.
It's more potent. It's more potent because as you stand in your power and in your love and in your authentic, infinite intelligence that, you know, really is at the root of who you are and who we all are. But your personal little, you know, anchor point in the universe of that consciousness, when you stand in that power and emanate the love, which you do, it's what attracted me to your work, and it's why I asked you to be in that show. I was attracted to the way you spoke about yourself, like, fearlessly, all these things, you know, like, those were certain things in my story that I was trying to put together. And, you know, just because I had been just sort of hiding this little glass pipe maker in the background, and then all of a sudden I'm getting asked to come to Alex Gray's and do the Greg show. So I immediately went around the visionary community, which was the closest I could figure out to folks that were artists that were trying to do something for, you know, a spiritually motivated purpose and try and have a positive effect on kind of the masses and the groups that they had. You know, I noticed that group started, you know, cohering around glass. And so when my situation came to kind of put on the table what it is I'm here to offer for myself, because I was asked to go to real art shit, you know, I couldn't just hide behind the pipe thing. When that time came for me, I was looking to you and Luke and Alex and, you know, Amanda. I chose you guys to reach out to you guys because of the way that each of you were just so fearless and honest in what you were here to share. You know, this is my art, here's what I believe, it's about love, like, unapologetically. And I'm in a spiritual closet. I still am. I'll throw some stuff up on my stuff, but I'm in so many spiritual closets because of the different spiritual realms and stuff that I've explored, like, just from my mom's side. I already accept, I mean, the prayer I said growing up was finished with Alawapa, like, Alawapa, you know, like, God, Allah is glorious. Like, I straight up grew up worshiping Allah. Mm-hmm. And then I go over, but not knowing it. We call God, you know, in my mom's Western world. But, like, then going over to my dad's, we're all hiding out at Sunday school and, like, just like, don't say a word of what we know, over when we're
those gods don't get together.
Yeah, no, dude. And so, like, you know, and finding the hippies, finding the rainbow, finding the you know, I caught onto the wake of the dead. That ship was already sailed when I showed up, but the wake was there, and somehow I was lucky enough to get caught in it. And the mentors and elders that I ran into were those early back to the lander, drop out of society type, outlaw hippie wooks, just total lot lords, At a time when I probably, most of my contemporaries my age were kind of went off and ran into Fish and Burning Man and I started having all these kids and stuff, so it kind of grounded me, and then Glass, and it's just like,
So you're bringing it back to the beginning where, you have faith in the future because you've seen yourself change throughout the years and grow. And
that's a really good way to put it.
See that both ourselves as imperfect human beings.
What do you mean by that?
Well, we're perfect in our imperfection,
I know, just
of
giving
course.
But I still developing.
But we're still got room for growth. For me to think that I'm done, it would be very foolish.
That's the number one trap.
And the same for humanity. We still got lots of room for growth, but it's going to happen. We have to have patience, as you said, and just have faith that it's inevitable that we'll go back to source at some point, and that things will get better, even if we got to go through some rough bumps.
That's it. And it is a planetary, dark night of the soul, and people who have been led to have to do healing work and have to face shadow already in their life, might have some tools that are useful for those people who are just seeing all of this craziness happening and feeling this pressure, being confined and locked down. That kind of pressure could be the source of endless fear, or it can actually catalyze, the kind of growth that everyone on earth essentially, I think, is capable. I think we're all going to do this. I really do. I don't have any fears about any of this. And you and me, we both look down all the same crazy rabbit holes, and we just see what people are putting out there. I like to look for overlap. I come from the left. I come from a progressive leftist background. And then going into the hippie stuff with the Earth First and the Save the Forest and the people chained into trees and the tree sitting and Rainbow, it was all outlaw, and that was one of the factions. There was overlap there. Mm-hmm. So when I come into this sort of situation now and notice how things have flipped in 10, 20 years, where the conspiracy theorists are
10,
on the
20
right.
years or 2 years even?
Right, 2 years. Well, last time I paid attention was 20 years ago.
What were you calling it? Order 55 or something?
Oh, like the Jedi thing. Like in Star Wars, where the Jedis, they were like...
From the prequels, at the end of the three first movies, the Republic soldiers who had been fighting the Clone Wars, they were all the good guys fighting aside the Jedis, and all of a sudden, the Republic turns into the Empire, and the leader of the good guys turns out to be the biggest bad guy and turns the switch, and now every good soldier is a stormtrooper working for evil, and they kill all the Jedi.
Yeah, they hunt him down.
That was like what, Operative 55?
Order 66.
Order 66.
Yeah, funny with the numerology, with Hollywood always dropping the reveals too.
Ooh, damn.
But think about this, the Jedis were like revered. They were like the peacekeepers of the galaxy, and they directed the clones around. Mm-hmm. And then after the Order 66, the clones just turned on all the Jedis and chased them off into the different parts of the galaxy. But you got to keep moving along because we see what happened. Eventually, yes,
it's a little bit of a parallel these days where we were all into. I don't consider myself left or right, but I would say in general I was always more into the left side and power to the people. And all of a sudden, just seems things have been just changed in a weird way where I'm I'm starting to resonate with a lot of things on the right too, where I just want sovereignty and to be left alone and the right to just do my thing without being peer pressured or guilt tripped into some ideology. I love the good intentions of a politically correct world and that we all want to make everybody feel included and not insulted. Sometimes I feel like it's what you're saying earlier in the interview, why are we all getting so insulted about something and then throwing the insult back? It's like a back and forth two sides attack as opposed to being like, hey, just be nice and don't fuck with somebody. And if you feel insulted, see oh, did they have bad intentions to insult you? And do you got insult back as a retaliation, or maybe they didn't know the new word that they should have had because maybe they weren't informed? Like, how can we understand each other with love and compassion and just keep on a conversation that's like, hey, like this particular word hurts me and let's try our best not to hurt each other. You know, like always being friendly.
Yeah,
It's supposed to be two sides fighting nonstop.
We have to get to know our mind first. We have to know our mind. We have to notice when our mind opposes or agrees or braces against an idea that it hears. And if you're speaking with somebody who's really wound up and really passionate about their idea, and if you don't share that idea, just their energy is, if you're not aware, if you haven't done the work of becoming aware of your own mind and your heart and your emotions and stuff, which we know this work exists, but if you've never done any at all, then you're probably always going to just get triggered into your spot of defense to hold your ground when you feel their energy being defensive, and you defend against it. So it's like, we don't want to make up our mind. We want to seek disconfirmation. We want to, for me, I know that I know that every human is a beautiful, divine spark of, divine energy. I don't see any difference. The more someone is in struggle, the more my heart pours out to them. I don't normally feel like, averse to that, to where I have to brace and be like, well, I'm good and they're bad. It's like, we're both good and I can tell they're feeling bad. Ideally that's where we want to be. But we have to have made friends and got acquainted with our own shadow, so that we don't project our shadow on others. That's really what's going on with this whole thing. This culture's been engineered. I mean, the signifying features of our culture are that we offload responsibility on others. I mean, we're taught from the very beginning to obey authority, rather than to find out for ourselves. And so that is not coherent with our genetic, ancestral, biological, neurological makeup. It's in opposition to it. Like it took us millions of years to get here. And our natural ability to determine truth and what's right in the world was developed in the same way that the frogs and the caterpillars and the tree and the sea moss figured out how to deal with their environment. That's the truth. We each possess that ability to know the truth. There's nothing to know but truth. There's nothing that is not God, according to the definitions I've ever read of God. Everything. So the universe is always perfect in its architecture and in its geometry at all times. The wind blows a tree, and the tree falls down and kills a baby rabbit, and then some maggots go in on the baby rabbit, and then those turn to flies that feed some frog that some little kid catches in the pond, and he's got a little frog, takes it up, and the wind's blowing that day. Now, who are we going to curse? The tree? We're going to curse the wind? Curse the maggot?
Everything is
perfect.
everything.
Yeah.
When I go into the space of ayahuasca, sometimes I realize that there's nothing bad, because the bad is also good, as God trying to observe itself from all these different perspectives, and as what we consider to be bad or painful or discomfort, that is as much important the equation as the joy and the love and it's all just trying to find the three dimensionality of the physical realm that everything had to put himself in order to experience it.
Absolutely. I think that
it's all blessings at the end of the day.
I totally agree. That's a beautiful way to look at it. I heard that someone say once that God has personality identity disorder, and we are God's altars. We're the separate personalities. Like the mind, is the fundamental. That's like the fundamental ground of what we can figure out and talk about, at least.
The operating system?
It has to come through here for us to even talk about it. But we think of us like the river of consciousness, and the whirlpools in the river. Like we're the different minds, but we're not really anything. You know, you can delineate the boundaries around us that make us what we are, just like you can look at a whirlpool and know there's forces that make that whirlpool exist. But you know, a minute later, it's just back to water. You know, and we know we're just the water. Like we're. You know.
Well, hopefully, in this knowing that everything is everything and everything is good and everything is love, may we go through times of darkness and self-realization through the dark night of the soul. We can find some peace in knowing that we're always in the hand of God, whatever that may be, and we'll be okay. And at one point, we'll go back to source, which is eternal, infinite bliss. And this video game was enjoyed for what it was. And
Absolutely.
We'll still try our best to do what feels good from our heart and what's connected to that part. Well, all my cameras are dying on me. So I think we're gonna.
I hope we can pull an hour out of that somewhere.
Oh, we'll use it all. It's a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much, Banjo.
Yes, brother.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And thank you guys for. Is this camera still working, John? Okay. And thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like, subscribe, comment if any of this conversation resonated with you, and I'll see you next week. Blessings! Woo!
LSD taught me how to see stuff. Aside from psychic revelations and visiting with God and coming to grips with the idea of dying and all that other good stuff LSD can help you out with, it taught me visually how to look at stuff, how to analyze colors, how to see patterns, you know, in waves or tree branches or leaves or veins or erosion, all that kind of stuff. It taught you how to look at it, really understand it, see nature. And we used to take it all the time, every weekend, and hitchhike down to San Francisco and go see bands, you know, at the Grateful Dead and the Starship, or not Starship, that was the airplane then.
Right.
And all the San Francisco bands, we'd save our lunch money. It was only $3.50 to get in. So if you saved up, if you could scrape up $5 a week, you could get a hit of acid and your thumb, get down to San Francisco and go to a show.
So make sure to subscribe, like, and everything else. Big thanks and see you next week. Peace!